Hi there, Cheryl from Garden in the Borough, gardening here in my Zone 5 Sandy Acre in Central Mass. And today I wanted to talk to you about some late season plants that I'm loving right now. And it's 4 salvias. 2 are tender perennials and 2 are hardy perennials that grow in this area. And one of them, the last one I'm going to talk about, actually loves to live and grow in the shade. So it's a woodland salvia or sage. So stay tuned and get to meet and hopefully love these 4 salvias. Maybe introduce them into your own garden. So this is Salvia, Phyllis Fancy. And this particular salvia is a tender perennial. It's only hardy, I would say, down to zone 8. I got these plants as small plants from Digging Dog Nursery in the very early springtime. They sold them as listed hardy down to zone 7, but I was looking up the parentage of this, and even though it's unknown, the suspects of who the parents might be are all hardy only to zone 8. So this is still a tender perennial. So this isn't going to be, I would push it if I lived in 7, but not here where we live, which I consider to be most years zone 5. But anyway, this is a tender perennial. And this salvia, it took a bit to get going, right? So it wasn't going to be a spring or an early summer flowering plant. It's started in September blooming, and it's still blooming. And you can see there's still new flowers being formed everywhere. And the flower is really interesting because on the flower stalk, like most salvias, it has these beautiful bracts and that are holding in the flowers. And many of them are being bred so that they have really interesting contrast. A lot of them are naturally that way, but some are actually selected because of the difference in the color of the calyx, which is holding in the flower. That's this inky, beautiful, smoky color, and the flower, which is in this case like a lavender white. And I am going to do some close-ups so you can see. But this is, I don't know how tall this is, maybe 3-4 feet. But if this was growing where it was actually hardy in a zone 8, this thing would get to be 5 by 5. This would be like a really big bush almost. And the plant's stems, and again, I'll come in and so you can see, are really woody at the bottom. Very, very sturdy plant, very, very beautiful plant. All salvias in my garden are absolute hummingbird magnets. So this one didn't get a chance to be that much of a hummingbird magnet because by the time it was blooming, it was probably mid-September, and they were already starting their migration. But others we're going to look at in the garden did. But this plant was part of a design plan that never appeared. So I was working in this garden earlier. We're right behind my pool. And these plants have a beautiful, and you can kind of see almost vase-like shape. I'll step so you can see without me standing there, that this plant has a beautiful sort of, it's narrow at the bottom, and it's a good plant to interplant with other perennials. And so the plan was, and when this garden was earlier in the season, I had a whole bunch of things growing in here, and it was sort of a hodgepodge, and I wanted this to be the tallest thing sort of coming up against the fence. And in the early part of the summer, I deconstructed this whole garden and I pulled everything out. And so this salvia looked very awkward, and so I actually had to transplant it. It was more to my left. There's another one over to my right, and there was actually a third one. And they were all worked into this garden, and because I ripped everything out and I had to transplant them, they got set back a little bit. But that's neither here nor there where we're talking about this plant and how beautiful it is. So I would grow this plant in a mixed perennial border, because it will work very well with other plants because it's so narrow at the base, and you can get it into the ground and it's going to come up, and all the flowers are going to stand above many of the other things that we're growing. I am going to try and overwinter this. So my plan for a couple of salvias is to wait until the weather's getting consistently cool, which it really hasn't been yet, and we're getting very close to a real good frost. And then I'm going to cut this back, and I'm going to keep I'm going to pot it up and keep it on the drier side in my cool basement over the winter and see if I can overwinter it. I don't know what my success is going to be, but that's my plan. Uh, Hopefully then next year, well, this plant will get bigger faster, and I'll incorporate it into a different part of the garden where it can sort of shine. But for right now, even though it's not where I wanted it to be, having it up against my fence from a distance, this plant looks fantastic because of how dark it is, and it really stands out against the fence. So it's been, in its own right, it's been sort of a garden asset, but it just wasn't what was intended. But anyway, this Salvia, Phyllis Fancy, is one that is fantastic for this late season garden. And now let's look at a couple more. So while I was over here taking some close-up video, I noticed, and I didn't realize that I had some softwood growing down at the base. So I didn't think I was going to be able to take cuttings of this because I thought all the stems were this thick woody growth, but I have some new growth. So I am going to try some softwood cuttings of this today as well. So that means I'm going to cut these little tiny stems off and try and root them and see if I can have smaller plants that I can overwinter as well. So stay tuned for that. So I will spin over so you can see the other one, the second one that isn't as big, but this is the second of the same Salvia, Phyllis Fancy it's called. All right, so I'm going to cut right underneath a leaf where there were leaves with this sharp knife and take off any of this extra foliage just by stripping it down. I don't need to cut it off. Whoops. I'm just going to leave, well, I might leave some of that top leaf, just take a little bit of it off. And then using a pencil, I'm going to make a little hole for it in here. And this is just a good gritty potting soil with a lot of vermiculite added into it. So I'm going to do the same thing. And make sure there's good contact, whoops, between that and the cutting label. And then the last step, oh, I just knocked the other razor blade on the ground, is to cover it so that it keeps in the moisture while the cuttings are rooting. This is Salvia granitica, black and blue. And you can see the calices on this. Oh my goodness. Talk about a beautiful, beautiful combination with that gorgeous, gorgeous bluish color and the black color of the calyx. It's just, to me, this plant is just a standout. So this was also planted as very, very small plants that I got in early spring. And I will say I did make a slight mistake. The reason I'm not standing in here with this plant is because you can see It's gotten a little bit warmer and the bumbles have come out and they love this plant. Hummingbirds love this plant. All sorts of bees love this plant. Oh, they're just everywhere. But anyway, I planted this in a really small, or I shouldn't say small, it's a wide container, but it's shallow. This salvia needs really good, rich soil and more moisture than most, in my opinion. So this is not a dry, loving salvia. This one absolutely needs some good, moist soil and some good watering habits. So it's done well with a lot of attention. So I'm going to, again, overwinter this plant or try to overwinter this plant and also take some cuttings. I will definitely grow it again next year, but I will plant it either in a deeper pot or in the ground. The good thing about planting it in a pot is if we have, again, another sort of typical New England fall where we're going to get a hard frost or even a light frost, and these tender plants won't make it through that, I can pop the pot into my garage overnight, and then it will often have many, many weeks after that initial frost where we have beautiful weather and we don't get another frost for a while. So my plan with this one will be to extend it as long as I can and then take cuttings, and or I am going to try and overwinter the whole plant by cutting it back and putting it in a pot and in my basement. I did read that you'll have to water it more frequently than something else you were keeping dormant over the winter, but I'm perfectly willing to do that. Okay, so that's salvia, black and blue. All right, we're still in and around my pool, and there's a couple of salvias in here, although one is dwarfing the other. So this is a bed that's got a lot of sort of herb type plants. It's got stackies, it's got lavender, and it's got some salvias. And you can see this is amethyst, salvia amethyst, which is a perennial salvia growing in here, sort of popping up everywhere. And this is the one we're going to look at though. And this is Salvia officinalis. So this I actually planted as a variegated form. And over time, of course, the green leaves are much stronger because they have more chlorophyll. And if you don't keep up with pinching it off, you're going to end up with the straight color. But that's fine. I love this grayish blue. These furry leaves, the rabbits do not touch this plant, even though this garden area is right next to one of their little hidey holes. So it looks fantastic all the time. So the great thing, and this I used to grow in this spot, Salvia beer garden. I'm not sure if that's how you say it, which is another Salvia officinalis with bigger leaves. You got to be careful with salvias sometimes, especially the ones that have those bigger leaves, when we have really wet winters. So this one's been doing all right. It's been here for about 3 years. And again, rabbits don't touch it, and it's beautiful, beautiful plant. And one of the big bonuses of this plant is this foliage stays present. I have used this foliage off of this plant as well as foliage off these lavenders in arrangements that I make for Christmas. Oh, there's a little salvia amethyst blooming right there. Christmas time. So into December in New England to be able to cut this for foliage. And I'll see if I can find a picture. I always use it on my mantle in little, I have these little, I don't know what you call them. They're vases, but they're really tiny and they just sit amongst garland. And I put these in with berries of the calicarpa. So beautyberry berries and this salvia and a few pine cones. Beautiful, beautiful in December. So this is just a great herb, but also a beautiful foliage plant for your garden. The last salvia I'm going to talk about today is one I wish more people grew. So we're looking at Salvia glabrescens, or Japanese woodland sage. And this plant could be either a cultivar or variety called Momobana or one called Shiho. I grow both of them and they're not blooming, so I can't tell the difference. They're not labeled. So I'll put in pictures of what they look like. But there are other varieties too. Those aren't the only two. But you'll notice right away the difference in the leaves from most salvias you're used to seeing. So they're still fuzzy, but they look more like arrowheads or sword shaped. I'm not really sure. I think arrow shaped. They're definitely thinner and bigger, and that's true of a lot of plants that grow in the shade. Their sun counterparts have stacked chlorophyll and thicker leaves, in their shade varieties tend to have thinner leaves because the chlorophyll gets spread out over a bigger surface area. So that could be why that is the case here. But anyway, still, if you touch the leaves, you still know for sure. They're almost feel and smell a little bit like lemon balm. But anyway, leaves aside, what we are growing this for are the flowers. So why am I videoing it when it's not blooming? Because even though it's October 3rd today, this is not blooming yet. So this plant was actually transplanted, so it got a tiny little bit behind. Usually by the first week of October, we're seeing some flower color, but I've moved this from another garden, so it got behind a tiny little bit, but it is an October bloomer for sure. So this needs a long season in my garden, where sometimes we can see frost as early as the first, maybe second week of October. But if you see frost later than that, or even if you don't, because there's some years we have later frosts, this plant is such an asset. And you can see, I'm really bad with the camera in these close-ups, but you can see another flower bud being formed in there and in there. So this needs some time to bloom. So if you live in a zone 6B, 7, I would absolutely 100% add this in as many places in your shady garden as possible. So obviously from the name, Japanese woodland sage prefers a shadier spot. I'm going to show you what it's growing around here in this little garden. It's right underneath and next to oak leaf hydrangea, then Russian comfrey, chocolate Joe pieweed, which is blooming now. It's bringing all the bees in here. Solomon seal behind me. And if I go this way, you'll see hosta. So this is in a shady spot right underneath. I'm underneath the canopy of a maple tree. And this does need a little bit of water. It's not for dry. Like some salvias can tolerate quite a bit of drought and dry soil. This one needs some moisture and some better soil. But this is going to come into bloom, and it's going to be a fantastic component to this little shady space at a time of year when almost nothing is blooming. This is a perennial plant. It's not an annual salvia. So this is one, again, that I encourage you to look for and add to your garden if you have some shady spots, and if you like have a longer season, extended season. If you grow in zone 5 and you get your first frost at the end of September, you're probably not going to get to see this bloom. But if you have a long season, you sure will. All right, so that's Japanese woodland sage. If you like any of these videos, please be sure to hit like and subscribe so future videos will show up in your feed. And as always, comment if you have any questions. And hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Happy gardening.